Recording 3. The Toddler. My third letter that I'll be recording arrived to me barely intact. It appears to be quite faded and yellowing from age. It has been folded several ways, suggesting that it has already been read a few times. It arrived soon after the first, however, it seems to have no connection to that letter at all, except for the fact that these people seem to know me personally. I don't know a Maud, Martha or Jennifer. The only John I know is a small border collie I see at the park every weekday when I walk my Jack Russell. It's certainly a more subtle supernatural element. However, I know this would frighten me a great deal. The letter is as follows. Dear Lisa, I hope this reaches you well. I've been meaning to write to you for some time. You see, I had a difficult time last week, and I haven't slept since. I wonder if you could help. It's not that I can't sleep. It's just I don't feel comfortable doing so anymore. I'm worried that each time I do, it shall be my last. It's not easy to explain, but I shall try my best. You see, it all started when my sister Jennifer decided to visit along with her daughter Maud. I'd never met my niece before, as they live in Ireland, and the trip tends to play havoc with my poor sister's seasickness. I was delighted to see little Maud. My own children have grown and left the nest, so it's just myself and John, my lovely yet inept husband. Jennifer and Maud arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Maud was the sweetest little child you'd ever seen, with her red-brown locks curled around her chubby face. Although she was timid at first, she soon smiled when John offered her a sugar mouse. She had looked so innocent hiding behind her mother's legs, her stubby fingers gripping the string of the pink confectionery. Jennifer apologised profusely for arriving late. She wasn't, but she was always a bit of a worrier. She was looking feverish, as one might expect her to do so after such a difficult trip. John had suggested she retire to bed early, and he showed her to the spare bedroom, leaving me with Maud. She didn't follow her mother upstairs, and sat on the floor where she was nibbling at the sugary rodent. She was only a toddler, and apparently hadn't taken to speaking yet, even though she was supposed to do so by now. Jennifer often wrote about her in her letters to me, detailing how nervous the little girl was. I felt awkward left alone with such a small child that was apparently so timid. She stared big green eyes up at me, taking in my expressions as though she were eyeing me up, trying to understand what sort of person I was. John soon returned. Jennifer was napping, but she said that Maud would stay up late. She apparently always did. We stood there, not quite sure what to do with this child. Eventually John picked her up and carried her into the living room. I half expected her to cry, but she happily giggled as he rocked her about playfully. We had supper, and Maud watched us intently the entire time, following us in and out of the kitchen. John talked to her like she was responding to him, asking her, "And what do you think?" "Of course you're right," leaving the gap in between responses as if she were reacting to his questions. It was sweet, but I couldn't shift the feeling of uncomfortableness from my body. There was something about the small girl that made me feel nauseous. She seemed to be aware of her actions. She would respond incredibly positively to John, grinning at him and waving her hand. However, when he left, She seemed to straighten up and stare intently at me, almost as though she were putting on a show for him. I don't know why I thought this child was doing this, but once I observed this, I couldn't stop considering it. Thankfully, John was tired and suggested we all get to bed. It was around 8:30, and I was sure Jennifer wouldn't want Maud up all night. Taking her upstairs, I gently knocked on Jennifer's door. Jennifer appeared far more rested from her nap and greeted me with a small yawn and a smile. However, her demeanour changed when she took Maud. She seemed instantly tired again, sighing as she shut the door on us to prepare the child for bed. I was quite relieved when John and I crawled into bed. I couldn't sleep, however, and I lay awake willing myself to sleep. It was probably 10 o'clock when I heard Jennifer's door open. She's probably getting some food or water. She must be hungry, surely. I thought to no one but myself. I considered getting up to help show her around the kitchen and find her something she could heat up easily. However, there was suddenly the sound of thunderous footsteps descending the stairs at top speed. These couldn't have been my sisters, as the sheer volume suggested a large man. Startled, I was still for a moment, as one does when one is scared, almost as if the thing of terror cannot perceive one, as one isn't moving. Looking over to John, I saw that he had not been woken up by the racket, but continued to snore annoyingly. I poked him violently with my foot, feigning an accidental kick of a sleeping partner. It did nothing. Listening again, there was nothing peculiar I could hear. So I went back to staring at the ceiling, hoping that those footsteps had been a hallucination from willing myself to sleep. However, there was an angry, deep cry of anguish from downstairs and a crash as though plates had been thrown across the kitchen. With fear for my new set of dining plates overwhelming the same fear of the invisible invader, I proceeded down the stairs to find out what was going on. Grabbing the umbrella from the coat rack, I peered round the living room door, hoping to God that I would not come face to face with a gigantic male. However, the first thing that my eye caught was the sight of a broken soup bowl smashed all over the coffee table. I was about to blow up when I heard a crash from the kitchen and a low giggle. Holding the umbrella high, I ran into the kitchen, ready to give the culprit a taste of my mind. Sat on top of the dining table was Maud, rummaging in the biscuit barrel, her curls hanging down over her face. Now, I don't know much about demons, but I did sneak in to see The Exorcist when John was at work once, even though the vicar had advised against it. When the little girl in that was possessed, her skin was green and purple. Maud's was still a peachy pale cream. She lifted her head to stare at me with her intense, questioning look. I sighed in relief as I realised there wasn't a large unknown adult male in my kitchen. I bent down to take the biscuit barrel from the little girl. "Sorry, sweetie, but I think you've had enough sugar for one day," I said, feeling silly for wielding an umbrella. Her face began to crumple into classic toddler tears of anger, playing across her face as if I'd asked her to put down a puppy. She didn't release her tight grip of the biscuits, and from somewhere there came a low growl. Then the girl spoke in a low voice.
"I wouldn't test me if I were you. Not unless you wish to lose your teeth."
I was so much in shock that I just stood there frozen in fear. I wanted to pinch myself. I must have imagined it, I thought. That was until she spoke again.
Did you even hear me? Are you deaf? I know something that should get you to respond.
With that, the girl threw the biscuit barrel across the room with so much force that it stuck in the wall behind me. She blinked up at me, smiling sarcastically with a gap-toothed mouth.
Back off! Unless you want the same thing to happen to your head.
Standing back, I lifted the umbrella back up. John! I yelled, worrying more about my safety than that of the small child.
John!
The small girl yelled back at me in the voice belonging to a being far bigger than her. I did not respond to her, opting to cry out again, John! Jennifer! The small figure of what I had thought was a child leapt off the table and grabbed in her stunted hand a broken plate, holding the jagged edges of it up threateningly.
Screaming? Is that honestly going to help you?
The figure said before chuckling. It slowly approached me. Feeling no attachment to the supposed child, I backed away before turning quickly and sprinting up the stairs. From behind me, I heard it yell before barrelling after me with speed. I barged into the guest room, shaking my sister in desperation as the sound of the heavy footsteps climbed the stairs. She seemed to be in some sort of state as she was unresponsive. Feeling terrible about it, I slapped her. She woke up gasping and looked around. She seemed incredibly confused and fairly annoyed. Martha, what on earth? She mumbled. Then Maud entered the room. She dropped the plate as she saw her mother awake and brought her hands to her face as though she had been crying. Sorry, Jen, I just... Looking at Maud, I stopped. She was clearly the more believable of the two. She looked like the picture of innocence. Martha, what's going on? Why are you in my bedroom? There was, I think, we had an intruder. I lied. I've always been quite good at lying, Lisa. John says I'm the best at poker. The girl grinned at me between her fingers. What? Jennifer was up and had picked up Maud, checking her over for damage. I was waking you to let you know that although we've had an intruder, Maud is fine. She heard me trying to clean up and came down to see what was happening, I think. She was getting in the way, so I brought her to you to hold on to. Jennifer seemed to buy this, placing Maud onto her bed. She's a very curious little one, always up at night. I think she might sleepwalk, Jen said, picking up the broken plate. Thanks for telling me. I'll come down and help clear up. Did they take anything? She was chatting cheerily, but I couldn't stop glancing at Maud, who was trying hard not to look at me. Have you woken up John yet? Jennifer continued conversationally, as she left to head downstairs. No, I haven't, I replied. Maud waited until her mother left the room to gesture for me to come closer. I did, keeping a safe enough distance from her in case she turned.
Don't think you're safe,
she whispered in her deep, gravelly tone. What are you going to do? Strangle me with your tiny hands? I retorted, quietly hoping that Jennifer wasn't too far away.
You just wait. One night I'll end you. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but you're on my list now.
The toddler told me. earnestly. Jennifer was supposed to stay with us for 3 weeks. It was supposed to be a lovely holiday for her and her young daughter. A chance for me to connect with my sister again and bond with my new niece. It's been a week and I've not told Jennifer or John about that night. I mean, they surely wouldn't believe me for sure. Maud has been nothing but polite the entire time they've been here. They wouldn't even believe she had misbehaved, let alone that she can talk and throw like a large adult male. I don't even know if that's all she can do. I've locked the bedroom door each night. I've tried to take naps when Maud and Jennifer are out of the house. John thinks this is weird, but I think he thinks it's something to do with my sister and I not getting along, which couldn't be further from the truth. I wish I didn't get on with her. It would give me a reason to get her to leave early with that child. Although I'm worried for Jen. What does this thing want with her? How long can Maud pretend she can't speak for? What would happen if Jennifer found out? Maybe she knows. She always seems so tired. Most people would assume that's just because she's a young mother with a young child. I wouldn't describe Maud as young. She still stares at me with an angry understanding. She's biding her time, and it's terrifying. I'm writing to you because I don't know what to do. She might not kill me this trip or the next, but I can't just sit and let this intruder lurk in the shadows at every family event, dangerous to anyone who discovers what it really is. What do I do, Lisa? Do I kill my sister's toddler before she becomes even more dangerous? Do I let whatever it is keep living off my sister, pretending to be hers? Do I tell Jen, I'm worried, please let me know? Maud might meet my children at some point. I don't want this to happen. I don't like the idea of my children not knowing what evil they're coming up against. It fills me with such worry. I hope you reply soon. It would be lovely to hear from you again. It's been so long, and you always knew what to do with things like these. Best wishes, Martha. The letter ends there. It's an unnerving story, and I wish I could answer it. However, like all of these, there is no return address and no distinguishing features noted in it. If I could respond to Martha, I would tell her to tell her sister, even if it means her sister didn't believe her. She could try to show her what her daughter really is. This thing may be posing as a child, like a parasite living off Jennifer. It's best that Jennifer knows about it. I hope Martha ended up all right. Perhaps Maud grew out of her possessed phase. That was Letters to Lisa, Recording 3, The Toddler, written by Phoebe Critchlow, read by Caroline Lawrie.